So for this next topic, we're going to be talking about the Democrats in the Bible and the way they've used it to certain things that they stand on. So I know Tyler had actually researched this a little bit. So I don't know if you want to kind of go into that.
Yeah, I mean, I just had specific instances of something that was super, that happened presently that was kind of obviously projected out on a large scale. So it was actually that Joe Biden president-elect speech that he gave most recently. So basically that he stated in the speech that I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide but unify, who doesn't see red states and blue states, but only sees the United States, and work with all my heart and with the confidence of the whole people to win the confidence of all of you. And for that is what America, I believe, is about. It's about people and what our administration will be about. Biden said in his speech in Wilmington, Delaware. So like you said, we kind of touched on that earlier, where he's calling for that unification of the entire United States now, when something that was more divisive to begin with because it didn't quite benefit their narrative. But now that he has the presidency, quote unquote, it's something that they want everyone to rally behind him on both sides. So the hypocrisy is immense, and I know that you probably have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be lectured to by the left who spent 4 years calling me a white supremacist Nazi. It's just not going to happen. I am not going to unify with someone who called me a sexist, racist bigot because I had views that didn't align with theirs. It's just I'm not going to unify with them. I'm never going to unify with them. It's not going to happen. And so this nonsense from Joe Biden that he thinks he can come out and just say a few words, maybe quote a Bible verse here and there, and then all of us dumb religious Bible thumpers will just forget everything he and his party have called us for 4 years and just join ranks is just insane. I think it shows how little they think of conservatives, and specifically religious conservatives, when they like the policies that they are pushing are just antithetical to a lot of basic religious views. I think abortion being the main one, where that the Democratic Party have become the party of abortion on demand, where you can be up to the second of birth and just kill a child and then just be applauded as a social hero. But then Biden can come out and say he's a devout Catholic, and Nancy Pelosi can say they're devout Catholics. It's just like, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. It's not for me to say you're not in some way spiritual, you have some level of faith, but for people to live lives which are completely opposite to the faith they claim to be and then lecture us on morality, I think is quite galling.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point as well, I mean, I'm not even white, I'm Hispanic, and I'm a little bit tanner than white people. So, but I've actually been called a white supremacist. I've been told that I have white privilege, and this actually came from people who were behind, the whole BLM movement. And then I had other people in the BLM movement say, your last name is Hernandez. How dare you stand with Trump? You're a disgrace to your last name. You're a disgrace to Mexico. You're this, as if I owe something to Mexico or anything like that. And then they would say, you're not white. And so I'm like, I don't quite understand. One group says I have white privilege, even though I clearly am not white. And another group says that I don't. So, like you said, when Biden comes in and, gives this, fluffed up speech about unity and how we need to bring all these states together, regardless if you're blue or red. I mean, it's just nonsense at this point. And like you said, I'm not going to fall for it either. And I hope that more Christians wake up to that fact. Like you were saying, abortion on demand is, such a big problem with the Democratic Party. But yet Christians can go and vote for him. But on Sundays, they're singing to, God. And I don't quite understand that. So, I just hope like we were talking about earlier about critical thinking, that, people really open up their minds and hearts to really what's going on here, and that they don't just fall for these fluffed up messages that Biden will give. I know he also went on to say,
I think there was that verse you referred to,
So he actually referred in that same speech to the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible. Biden continued on to say, to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap, and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America. So again, like we said, he's trying to take these different portions of scripture to try to justify what they have done in the past and what they continue what they'll want to do in Biden administration. So I think that, as Christians, that we do need to be very, very careful with what they say. And again, this goes for both sides, because Republicans can also find themselves in the same situation. So as consumers, again, as people who select them to be in office, we do need to be very careful of these people, and we need to hold them accountable. If Biden does end up winning, if he says one thing and, does the opposite, well, we need to be there to make sure that we, the people, hold him accountable for what he's saying and what he is doing. So yeah, it's just, for me, it's just mind blowing to just see how, they use the Bible to try to rally up Christians who they know are, some of the people who are going to most vote for these candidates.
Well, it just shows how stupid they think religious people are. Like that's what it comes down to, is that they think that if you're religious, so say if you're Judeo-Christian and you follow the Bible, or if you're any other religion, because they do the same things to other religions. You'll see random festivals, they'll always say to those celebrating this festival. Right. They're just pandering. They think that all they need to do is wave to one group, maybe quote a Bible verse here and there, and people will think that they are like them, or that they will therefore vote for Joe Biden because he read one line out of the Bible. Or Pete Buttigieg, I think the thing that upset me most was Pete Buttigieg has this habit of using the Bible to support pretty insane views. Like he was saying that life is defined by breath by the Bible, therefore abortion is fine until the baby's taken its first breath. It's like, well, that's quite literally not what the Bible says. The Bible says that God breathed life into, and if you look at the original Hebrew, he's basically breathing the soul into someone. It's not about the baby's breath, it's about God's breath, which is not a concrete thing. But you see the left, a lot of whom don't know anything about the Bible, anything about really the text of religion, and will just think, oh, okay, cool. They look at all of these texts not as something to live by, but almost like a cheat code that they can, if they can manipulate it into supporting what they want to conclude. It's exactly how they treat the Constitution. They don't treat the Constitution as a set of texts which define how our society should be. They see it as, okay, how can we manipulate this to support what we want? That's how they got Roe versus Wade through. There's no part of the Constitution that says that abortion is a constitutional right. There's not one letter in there. But if anything, it protects life. Like that's literally what it says. So it's quite.
And I
quite
think they know, and I think they know that people are not going to read the Bible. They're not going to read the Constitution, and it is why they can manipulate what it says, and they can manipulate people into thinking, oh no, it doesn't say that, it says this. Like you said, abortion. They think abortion is somehow justified in the Constitution, and that's not at all the case. And they also use the Bible, like you said, they're using portions of Scripture to say, oh no, abortion is fine, when really God says, murder is a sin, it's an abomination before God. So again, people are not going to do the reading themselves. They know that, and they're going to do whatever it takes to continue to keep it that way so that they can suppress the people into thinking what they want.
I just also think it's somewhat amusing when people quote the Bible when they cherry pick bits of it they like and then other bits they don't. There's a lot of the Bible that, if taken literally, says things that would go quite against what our society would accept. But when you have someone like Biden who just takes pieces out of it as if that's therefore proof that he wants. So, well, do you believe in the Bible or not? Because if you do, I've got some significant questions. It's exhausting. I find it offensive. It's like intellectually disrespectful. But that's the left. They think they're the smart ones, and anyone who disagrees with them is doing so because they're dumb.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of Christianity is obviously, I think, the most prevalent religion in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously there's a difference between claiming Christianity and actually being strong in your faith. And I think that's what you kind of stated, is they're relying on those people that are claiming the title but not quite doing their homework, I guess you could say. And then,
which is fine. Like, sorry to interrupt, but that's fine if you're not going to use it to ram policies down someone's throat. Like, it doesn't matter how you identify religiously or how seriously you take your scripture that you care about. Like, I don't think that's an issue. The issue is when you sporadically claim authority based on your level of religion. That's the problem. It's when Nancy Pelosi staggers out and claims she's a devout Catholic, therefore every single one of her positions on abortion is completely fine. It's when you're using religion to get your way rather than using your religion to influence how you think. That's the problem I think we should be having.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a couple of verses I pulled up on that as well. One of them was Titus 1:16. It says that they claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. They are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for doing anything good. So obviously that goes hand in hand with us referring to the Democrats and them using the scripture to kind of, reinforce their policies and reinforce their views. And also people need to be careful with, in terms of how people use old covenant laws and then new covenant laws. So we're talking pre and post the birth of Jesus Christ. Obviously, like you said, some stuff in the Old Testament, if you took it literally, it'd be it'd be something that wouldn't be socially acceptable in current modern times. But then you need to be able to read your Bible and understand the context of each situation and where it lands in the Bible as far as Old Testament, New Testament, and just kind of be able to, interpret that properly, I would say.
Well, I also think that I'd rather just politicians not talk about religion unless they genuinely believe it. I think there are some devout religious politicians out there for whom, whether they're Christian or Jewish or another religion, that their faith means something. I would rather Biden never talk about the Bible. I don't take his position on faith particularly seriously. I'd rather he put forward, say, logical positions or just other arguments that I think more people can understand, because it doesn't make sense for him not speaking from a position of authority to suddenly be referencing a religion that is otherwise irrelevant to his positions. It doesn't make sense. It's like, so I'm Jewish, but I never talk about why, like, my religious beliefs with most people, because it's not going to make a difference to them. I'm not trying to convert anyone. I'm trying to convince people that, like, conservatism is a better ideology than the others that we have access to. And so I need to meet people on a level where we can agree. And I feel like Joe Biden is trying to meet Christians on a level that, oh, we're both talking about the Bible. We both think the Bible is great. Therefore, I agree with Joe Biden. That's just not how it works. And I don't think people will fall for it. I think most of the data suggests that religious Christians tend to vote conservative. But that could change because, again, the media pushing Biden suddenly as this devout religious man. It doesn't take much for people, if you think someone to be something that they're presented as, it doesn't take long before people know that to be true. So I hope people just see through it, because it really is just nonsense.
It really is.
And it's plain and simple. It's just pandering. That's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to make themselves relevant in a base that wouldn't necessarily support them, I would say. So even if they just throw out a couple of verses here and there, then that is going to get some, followers and Christians as well. But and it's kind of like you said, it kind of made me think about the sports aspect we touched on earlier as well, where if you have these sports figures, these athletes that are kind of, dipping their toes in the political realm, maybe don't talk about politics. Maybe if you're heavily involved or something, like you said, that you have a passion for and you actually have knowledge of, then by all means, be more proactive, be more activated in the political sphere. But if it's something that you're just going to kind of dip your toes in and kind of start swaying people that support you or that follow you, then you need to you need to stay in your lane. I guess Laura Ingraham kind of said it kind of blatantly when she talked about LeBron James. She said, "Shut up and dribble." I wouldn't quite use that terminology, but in a sense, it's true because in a sense, it is true. Because like you said, if they don't have any, professional more knowledge on that area, then they should probably just stay where they are and if they're good at what they do, then just continue to do that.
It's just exhausting too. I think people are just tired of being pandered to. Like I think especially that's why Trump did so well with the minority vote, is because people are exhausted of being told that by nature of your skin color, your heritage, that you are disadvantaged in America, when it's just really simply not true. I think Trump got record numbers of the black vote, of the Hispanic vote. Really, it was white males who saved Biden in a lot of ways, which is kind of hilarious for the party who told us that white supremacy is running the world. I think that is a really great sign, I think, for conservatism, that they are reaching people who previously weren't reached as much. I think people are realizing that you are not a victim by nature of simply what you look like or where you came from. It's just not true. So I'm pretty enthused by that. I'm excited by that. I hope that we grow with that, because if conservatives continue to speak to minority communities and people who previously have been ignored and basically just been dominated by Democrats, it's going to be very hard for the left to actually maintain a footing, because they've entered these elections assuming they're going to get 80 to 90% of the black vote, assuming they're going to get 80 to 90% of the Hispanic vote. And as you said before, they condemn anyone who dares vote the other way if they are a member of those communities. But if that's no longer true, can you imagine what America would be like politically? If you can't just rely on a huge, I think the African American community in America is like 12 to 13% of the
Yeah.
population, maybe more. I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah, I think it's 13.
But imagine if that wasn't just a sure thing vote for the Democrats, for example. And it shouldn't be, because Joe Biden, some of the comments he said on the Black community is insane, especially when you think about the left being anti-police. And who have they elected? They've elected Joe Biden, who was responsible for the crime bill in the 90s, which put thousands upon thousands of Black men in jail for reasons he now thinks are wrong. And then you've got Kamala Harris, who also spent most of her life locking people up. So the anti-police left have elected two of the people responsible for more Black people in jail than basically anyone else in American politics. So I'm pretty enthused. I think the next couple of years are exciting for conservatism and the minority community, as long as we don't pander. But I don't want conservatives to go out pandering to people. Like when Donald Trump did that picture where he was eating like a taco bowl or something, like, I love Hispanics. Like, don't do that kind of thing.
Oh, the Goya.
Yeah, it's just like, we don't need that. People are individuals. Speak to them as individuals. Like, go into these communities and tell people, like, we don't think you're victims and you're not a victim. That's all people need to hear.
Well, I think the problem is with many of these politicians is they love to piggyback on people's emotions. They know that people are very, very emotional, especially when it comes to like minority groups, like the Hispanic people, the African American community. And so that, like we said, like they'll pander to these people because they know in return they'll receive a vote and they need that vote. But like you said, at the same time, we're seeing that these minority groups are awakening to these facts and they no longer want to be treated that way. They don't want to be treated like, you know, they have been. Yeah, like it's just absolutely ridiculous. They want to be treated like everyone else. And, you know, like I said, I'm excited to see that change as well. I hope that we'll continue to do that. Of course, you know, staying away from pandering and things like that. But I hope that more people will continue to wake up and realize, like, I don't need to rely on my emotions, on my skin color, to vote one way or another. You know, we need to think for ourselves and use our brains at the end of the day. So I'm excited to see that as well. And I hope that it'll only increase from here.
I think it will. I think that's something Donald Trump has been uniquely successful at.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to conservatives to build on that moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on one more kind of portion of that speech that Joe Biden had given. He did reference another verse in that. One of his direct quotes was, "Folks, in the last days of the campaign, I began thinking about a hymn that means a lot to me and my family, particularly my deceased son, Bo," he said. "It captures the faith that sustains me and which I believe sustains America," he added, referring to Americans who had lost a loved one through COVID-19 this year. And he also referenced a verse, "And he will raise you up on wings of eagles, bears you on the breath of dawn, and makes you shine like the sun when you hold you in the palm of his hand." So again, it's just, he used that emotional frame of mind to kind of get people talking about his deceased son, obviously, which is a tragedy. So it's hard for people to go against somebody that speaks on emotional topics such as that, especially as something that's so personally involved.
And that's what he's good at. Biden is a very emotional speaker, I've realized. Even in the debates, yes, he would always say, "Look what Trump has done to you. He didn't tell you." Like, he would always refer it back to the people and make that emotional connection to make you feel bad and to make you feel like, wow, like he really understands what I'm going through and maybe I should vote for him, because Trump apparently is very straightforward and down to the core of truth. So sorry to interrupt you. I just had to
totally. It makes sense. But yeah, so he did that in the debates as well, where he talked directly to families. He said, we're going to have less people sitting at your dinner table tonight because of COVID-19 and how Trump had mishandled it. So again, he's doing it very well, and he's playing on the emotions of people. I kind of want to segue talking about COVID-19 into actually talking about coronavirus throughout the country and where we kind of currently stand as a nation and globally as well. So I know this is a huge topic, obviously the biggest issue that we're kind of facing aside from the presidential election. It's something that's been affecting us very personally, very deeply. I think everyone's been negatively affected for the most part by this pandemic. So we'll definitely dive into that. I know there's probably a lot of information we can touch on as well, but what are your first impressions on where we are currently with the coronavirus pandemic, and what do you see us, how do you see us moving forward into next year through it?
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with the coronavirus handling is the assumption that politicians know what they're doing. I think the media has done everyone a giant disservice by blaming Trump for everything to do with coronavirus as if it's an entirely American problem.
Yeah.
You look all over the world, so many countries have done different things and they've been hit at various times. So, for example, some parts of Europe, universally wore masks, had lockdown after lockdown, and it's hitting them really hard right now. Some parts of Europe didn't lock down at all, and it's hit them hard at different times. And the way the US media have basically forgiven the Democrats who were responsible for tens of thousands of deaths in nursing homes, so for example, Andrew Cuomo in New York, the way they've forgiven him and yet blamed Trump at the same time. Again, I think this is actually the biggest impact the media had on the election, is making COVID Trump's fault. Trump, I don't think, did a great job, honestly. I don't think he was a failure, but I don't think he did an amazing job. But ultimately, it wasn't really his job to fix. It was governors and states' jobs to fix. And he, from all intents and purposes, all the evidence we've seen, did a pretty good job of giving them the resources they need. And so the blame for the failure of states falls on the states. My feeling is, though, that the media are then going to invest heavily in the idea that Biden has saved us, regardless of whether he did or didn't. If you look back to H1N1, it was really luck that nothing bad happened. It was luck that it wasn't that bad a disease, basically. And so now Biden's going to come in. He's going to enact the same policies that Trump is already enacting, as if they are new ideas. The media is going to support that idea as if they're new ideas. Really, the only idea that Biden is putting forward that is different to Trump is everyone wear a mask, which, like, I'm generally in favor of mask wearing, but there are countries in Europe who have been wearing masks since this started, and they're being hit really hard by COVID. There is no evidence that universal mask wearing would actually have a giant impact here. Plus, it's also not the government's role to force everyone to wear a mask anyway. So I don't think anything's going to happen. I think COVID is going to play itself out until we get this vaccine distributed widely. I think the vaccine itself has been politicized to a disgusting level. The fact that Kamala Harris on the eve of the election came out and was pushing anti-vaccine propaganda, basically saying as if Trump was in his basement making the vaccine himself.
Right.
And the media forgave her for that too. Like the Democrats, when it comes to the coronavirus, have been appalling, and the media have covered for them. And we should never forgive the Democrats, but we should never forgive the media, because the media are why the Democrats got away with it. The media are why Andrew Cuomo is being looked at as a potential future presidential pick, when he is solely responsible for over 30,000 deaths in New York. But it is his fault. Other states, for example, Florida, had different policies when it came to nursing homes. They have different death rates. It is truly appalling what happened in these Democratic places. And you still see it today. You see Democrats going out without a mask and then telling everyone else to wear a mask. You see Democrats locking down their economies while members of their family can carry on as normal. I think it's really appalling. And so I see it kind of solving itself through the vaccine and things like that. I don't see Democrats or Joe Biden doing a thing to help anything,
I agree.
regardless of what the media will tell us.
Right. And we also, I think we need to understand that, this is a virus. We need to let it take its course. There's nothing that we can do completely to 100% eradicate it on the spot. And, just, locking down people is only going to ruin the economy, going to ruin these businesses, and at the end of the day, when we go back out, we're going to get sick again. So I don't know. For me, it's just, I don't see the point to these lockdowns. I see it as a way that these governors are trying to control American people. And we've fallen for that narrative that, if we do this, it'll completely go away. And we've seen that time and time again, that it doesn't necessarily work. So I'm especially frustrated with that. And
I think it's actually more about ineptitude than control. I think a lot of people look at this as Democrats just wanting to control us all. And I think there's some truth to that. I think a lot of it is just Democrats don't want to be seen as wrong. And so their reaction is, okay, what can we do to stop people getting it now? Let's lock everything down with no thought to the suicides it'll cause, to the economic impacts it'll cause, because all they want to do is follow what a doctor says. And a doctor is being judged by different rules. Like a doctor's job is to save lives, with no regard for things like economics, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a politician's job to take a lot of these other variables and then measure them to find the best middle ground. The problem with what the Democrats have been doing is they are basically afraid of being wrong, afraid of making a mistake. And so they're just flailing, coming up with policies that have no real rooting in reality. They know the media will cover for them. Right. And so why not just lock everyone down? Who cares? You can just borrow more money in the future and pay everyone anyway, especially if you can use it to blame Trump. I think it would have been very different had a Democrat been in office, because they wouldn't have had the inherent motivation to point to Trump and say, this is his fault.
Well, exactly.
I think we'd be foolish to assume that a lot of these decisions to lock down with no regard for the economic impact was because Trump was basically head of an economy that was doing so well.
Yeah.
So we've just got to stop assuming that politicians know what they're doing. They really don't. I mean, we were just talking about how celebrities don't know anything about politics. Politicians don't know anything about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a global pandemic that the world is struggling with, why do we think that some elected officials uniquely know how to solve it when countries across the world don't?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the big problem that I see is like you said, it's people plant coronavirus and they look at it exclusively as an American problem when it's a global problem. And I think that, like you said, with the doctors being the experts in this field, we have a lot of people that were calling for Trump to do exactly as Dr. Fauci said and have no regard for any other areas of our government, like you stated. So they have a tough job of balancing, the economic aspect of things, the public health aspect of things. And there's a fine line that you have to walk between that, because if you lean too far one way, then you're going to be extreme negative consequences on the other. And then as far as the mishandling of, governors and on the state level, I think we see that reaction immediately of people. There's max exodus coming out of these countries or out of these states in terms of like New York, California. We see these people leaving these states in droves. And I think that's an immediate response to the mishandling of this direct virus itself. And people are obviously waking up and realizing that maybe they don't have all the answers and they don't know exactly what they're doing. So I think that, again, that's something it's negative in the current time, but I think it's going to be positive moving forward, because people are going to start waking up to the fact that we need to be more intuitive. And obviously we keep saying this, but think critically when we view these certain types of things. So I
think what's frustrated me most about COVID is I think it's brought out the worst in everyone in a lot of cases. I think it's brought out the worst in politicians because they are afraid to say the truth. They're afraid to say, we don't really know what we're doing. Like, we're going to have to learn as we go.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some people are going to die. Like, this is a global pandemic. The way Biden came out and said that if I was in power, no one would have died. It's hilariously ignorant and false. Like
if you
no
take on
country
the
has handled
fight
this.
directly.
Yeah, it's just like, so it's almost like Biden is some kind of messianic being that comes in, clicks his fingers, and COVID is gone. So politicians, we need to demand politicians that they basically tell us the truth. And if something bad is happening, it should be like, well, something bad is going to happen, not just promising you everything is going to be okay. But I've also just seen the worst in just the people around us that we live in our communities. There are some people who have, I mean, I was very, very careful early on, kind of during lockdown, trying to keep away from people. But you've got some people who are almost militant about it. You've got some people who think COVID is a hoax, which is just like demonstrably not. There's evidence that COVID is real, that it's deadly. And so there's a lot of people who are throwing their own gasoline on the fire, when I think we should be all trying to come together and say, okay, look, we don't know what's going on. We don't know how long this is going to last. What can we do now to try and mitigate the situation by keeping people who are high risk out of risk, but also not burning our country down?
Exactly.
And if we had had that sensible conversation of, okay, if we all wear like the N95 masks, the masks that actually do like a decent job of protecting people and others, but we keep everything open and we keep people who are elderly or at risk separated, that would have been a far better policy than just let's lock down some places, but people will carry on doing what they want anyway. Let's put people who are COVID positive into elderly homes. Like, there's so many mistakes we made. And all we need to do is just find that middle ground where we find sensible policies, which, while also accepting that there will be impact, like some people are going to catch COVID, some people are going to die of COVID. That's just a reality of the world we live in. Unfortunately, a lot of people, I don't think, want to accept that. I think a lot of people want to believe in the idea that you can elect someone and they will solve it. It's just not true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the virus has been extremely politicized. I don't think that's there's any question to that. And that being the case, it's just something that it's taken a toll on the people on the, on the consumer level. It's kind of a weird analogy, but I was thinking like they're kind of blanketing these policies to kind of pertain to every single American. Like you said, there's different segments, there's different demographics, there's more people that are more susceptible to the virus itself. So it'd be like if you had a country full of hungry people and all you sent them was jugs of milk and bread. Like that's not going to help everyone, because there might be someone who's lactose, and there might be somebody that's celiac or has gluten intolerance or something like that. So there's not just one thing that you can put on this. There's not one band-aid you can put on a wound that's death by 1,000 cuts in terms of being across the country. Like there's targeted policies that you need to take, targeted stances that you need to take in response to this. And I think that's something that been a failure from the presidency all the way down, I guess, in a sense. I know Trump's obviously more privy to wanting to reopen the economy and kind of, again, have that more freedom of people and trusting the Americans to take that stance of, being responsibility and having, cleanliness and wear masks when necessary. And but again, we need to have some more common sense on this issue overall.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair and to criticize Trump for a moment, Trump's handling of COVID, I think his failures came down to his messaging. I think the actual stuff his administration did was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think he supported states when they needed it. He gave governors what they needed. I think that's all great. I think the way he's criticizing the World Health Organization is fantastic. They were awful. My problem with Trump is the way that he didn't help with his messaging. Like, people listen to what the president says and they want to hear what the president says and they see them as an authority figure. I don't think they should be, but that's just the reality of what there is. And when he comes out and he, say, promotes conspiracy theories about various drugs that we don't have evidence work yet, for example, like, those drugs may have worked, they may not, but the way he was just promoting random things he saw on Twitter or saying about masks, whether they work or not, it would have been more sensible for him to say, look, we don't know what's going on. All we've got is the information we have to hand. Like, the experts are saying, like, we should be wearing masks. I will be wearing a mask. I advise other people to do as well. He made it very easy for the media to paint him as just a conspiratorial loon bag, because sometimes he acted like one. And I think people need to realize that sometimes Trump is great. Like, sometimes his Twitter is great. Sometimes his fights are great. But COVID was a moment for someone just to be calm and realistic. And I think it was another case of what Trump did was great, but what Trump said wasn't. And I think he's his own enemy in that way. He just, sometimes if he dialed down what he said by 50%, and you were just left with the amazing things his administration did, it would be impossible to vote against him. Like, on paper, he hasn't had an incredible administration. But on Twitter, it's not really quite the same thing.
Yeah, I think, Twitter was never invented. I think many would regard Trump as the greatest president in the history of this country.
Yeah.
He does have that foot and mouth syndrome quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that's maybe a reactionary measure, like a retaliation in terms of how the media always, jumps on these certain areas or puts out information immediately when it's not necessarily, justified by the facts or the evidence. And I think that he just gets reactionary in that sense, where he puts stuff out also to kind of counter those, those narratives, and then a sense, and then obviously it comes back to bite him in the butt. But
I mean, it's fine. You just got to pick your moments, pick your battles, right? The analogy people always use is like, he's a hammer in search of a nail. Sometimes he hits a nail, sometimes he hits a puppy, and you want him to be waiting to see if it's a nail before he swings. Because when he hits a nail, it's amazing. Like, when he gets in these battles with the media and he slams them justifiably, it's fantastic. I think it's something conservatives have been waiting for decades.
Oh, yeah.
But when he gets into silly fights, I think that's honestly a big part of why some people voted for Biden over him, is because it's exhausting. I think Trump needs to, he's an old man. He's not going to change. But if in an ideal world, if Trump could learn from that and just dial that down even 10%, I think he would have had a much better shot.
Yeah.
I mean, just viewing coronavirus as a whole, I don't think there's anybody that knows exactly what's going on. I don't care what kind of degree they have. I don't care what their title is. Nobody knows the solution to this problem. And that's part of the issue itself. Like, people are looking for answers and there's nobody that has them. So they're looking to different sources. They're looking to doctors, they're looking to politicians, looking to celebrities. No one's telling them what they want to hear in terms of having an actual solution. And again, this isn't exclusive to the United States. We look at other countries, like you said, in Europe, especially like places like Italy, where they have a more elderly population that's been hit a little bit harder than most other countries. And then we look at someone like Sweden, where they have virtually no more issues in terms of the virus itself. And they never took, super drastic reactionary measures in terms of lockdowns and mask wearing and that kind of thing. But they just had a different outcome than most other countries did. So it just, it depends on your location, your demographics. And it's just, there's no one solution like we've been talking about to this problem. So it's something that's going to evolve into the future. And it's something that we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to take it on as it comes.
Yeah, I mean, I have to get going. So I think one way I'd love to just wrap this up is just the idea that politicians don't have the answers, and we, as consumers of either the media or political speech, should be okay with the answer, I don't know. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to, is so many people are looking to our leaders for answers. And if they said, we don't know, I think people would freak out. And we need to be strong enough to accept the answer we don't know, but we're going to find out together. I think if we accepted that, whether you're on the left or the right, if you were able to accept that answer, I think we would be in a much better spot. Because months ago, we would have basically accepted the situation that COVID is going to do some bad things. We don't know exactly what to do, but we will make small steps along the way to try and improve things, rather than panicking, shutting everything down, and having potentially more people kill themselves or have severe other medical issues that aren't being treated than we did, say, from COVID. So it's really, we just need to get better at accepting that we don't always have all the answers.